This call will be recorded. Matt, welcome to the call. I'll be your moderator, Allison Cockrell, and just wish to thank you all for choosing to spend your time with us this morning as we talk about the social impact of real estate. To ensure that we can help you as best as we can during this recorded call, if you'll kindly add any questions that you might have into the chat box at the very bottom of your Zoom screen. If you drag your cursor to the bottom, there should be a button that allows you to click the chat. And if you do click the chat button and add your questions there, as we go along through the presentation, Joel will be happy to answer any questions that you may have so that we can keep it light and just a nice discussion type presentation. So feel free to add your questions there and we'll answer them as we go along. So without further ado, if you'll allow me to introduce to you our presenter, the President and CEO of Wesley Community Development, Joel Gilland.
Thank you, Allison, and good morning, everybody. You can all wave because I can't hear you since you're muted. How's everybody doing? I see a lot of faces out there that I know, and it's good to see you again, and some that I don't. And so I'd like to begin tonight or today. It's a day session with just a brief overview of who Wesley is, so you understand some of the context of how we approach this conversation. So Wesley is a fully licensed commercial real estate firm that is nonprofit, was born out of the Western North Carolina Conference. We're licensed in North Carolina and Georgia and soon in Virginia. And we only deal with faith-based properties, helping them to reimagine, repurpose, and redevelop their physical assets to help live into their vision. We were actually created in 2002. A group that all of us know called the Duke Endowment granted to the Western North Carolina Conference $1.5 million with the mandate to build affordable housing. So,
Joel, if I might just jump in for just a moment, if your share screen is available, I just don't see it on my end, and I want to make sure folks are seeing it on theirs.
Are you?
Okay, so Joel, if you can click the share screen button at the very bottom, we'll just make sure that it's appearing on screen for everyone else. And if there's some difficulty, I can also help. There it is.
There we
You
go.
can see it now. Perfect. Thank you.
That's why we have her here. So, during from 2002 to 2008, Wesley built single-family homes, did all the credit counseling and all the forgivable down payment loans, etc., to help the folks get into them. We built 85 single-family homes. Even pardon me, even during the recession, only one of those homes ever went back to the lender, and we purchased it to redeploy it back into affordability. 2008, the recession came along, and you weren't going to do single family homes, so we switched to LIHTC, which is low-income housing tax credit projects. And my screen is not moving. There we go. So during the time that we've been around, we've built 85 single family homes, 1 UMAR home, 9 low-income housing tax credit projects. The picture you see is one of those. So in that kind of scenario, we could build to go out of affordability and redeploy them back. And so we built just under 1,100 homes or units of affordable housing in our history. About 2015, we began focusing more on church or faith-based properties and created a class called Seeds of Change. Seeds of Change was a lot like what we're talking about here. It was to bring churches together, 8 churches at a time, 1 pastor, at least 3 laity, because if the laity don't buy into it, doesn't matter what the pastor's talking about, and just spend 2 days drinking from a fire hose of how you could use real estate to better connect to community and to better impact. Telling everyone from the very beginning, we don't have the silver bullet. Everybody's different. Every church is different. What we do want is for you to not think of your churches as silos, as places we only use on Sunday, Sunday night, and Wednesday. That led us, pardon me, into beginning to do coaching and consulting with churches. So we have a variety of ways that we'll consult with churches to help them rethink their real estate, rethink how that real estate can impact the community around them, and how they can use an asset they already have to engage. That led us also about 5 years ago to partner with the Board of Trustees to develop the new conference center, which I'm sure most of you have seen. Conference Center made two statements that we think were very important. One, half of this building is leased. And so the churches are not bearing the cost of this building. So the first statement was the church can be sustainable without relying only on the plate. The second was this is a LEED Gold building. It's the first LEED Gold building under version 4 in North Carolina, under version 4 of LEED. It has an 85 kW solar array on the rooftop, and we've recently installed EV charging stations out front. The point being there is that if we say we care about something, and if creation care and the impact that creation care has on the environment and on our communities, if it's really important to us, let's build to it. Let's let our buildings and our campuses speak to it. So that led us to begin working with conferences and with other churches. So since 2020, we have helped churches create additional income through leases and ground leases. If you total all of those up in the 4 years we've been doing it, it equals $71 million in additional revenue. We now manage the property for 3 annual conferences. We partner with 2 additional annual conferences through a program we've developed called Blueprint Network, which is a way to help conferences across the country organically grow a Wesley type entity within their conference. We also are working in 2 municipalities, work in Atlanta and several projects, and in Nashville. So how does this vantage point of living into real estate affect our thinking of social impact? We start by going back to our DNA. We go back to the Foundry. The Foundry Church, as you recall, John Wesley's first church, in the same building, did multiple things. It was not a worship and youth group only. There was a meeting room, the chapels, free school, which is a reason that we have a lot of education buildings attached to our facilities, housing and feeding programs, the community center, free pharmacy, medical, and a lending society. We were one of the first to do microloans. And so all of that came out of the same building. This building did not sleep. One of the reasons that Wesley is as involved in the work we are is that I'm a preacher's kid that did not go to seminary. So I went into commercial real estate instead. But what I began to notice as I was on the board of Wesley was an awful lot of empty buildings and empty parking lots with a cross and flame on them. And it seemed to me that we could do better. We could be better stewards. And so that's why, and that's why we do the work we do, trying to help churches navigate back to the Foundry model, back to connecting to community, back to service. We also have to, remembering that, we need to understand that we are standing on the shoulders of generations that came before us. So for generations, the church model has been that we have sacrificially given to purchase real estate, to build real estate for the kingdom. And so now those generations have given us a significant platform to stand on. So in the state of North Carolina, and we're very data driven, And so we have gone through all the tax records to map this out once we began working with the two conferences in North Carolina. In North Carolina, the United Methodist Church has 16 million square feet of real estate, 3,000 total parcels and 7,000 total acres of land. So the conversation we're having now, if we as a denomination want to do things for social impact that have an impact, we have the platform to do it. We have a huge platform across the state. So if we're talking in the same language and we're trying to have social impact, we already have the platform and we already have the DNA. We have the roadmap of how to do this. So in any kind of conversation, social impact of churches nowadays, the first thing that comes up is housing. And you've all heard it. There is a tremendous amount of conversations about churches should be helping to address the housing issue, which I don't disagree with. But there is a much bigger conversation about that. What does housing mean? So in our work, we've really had to think through that. What is affordable housing? Affordable housing is a very relative term. So if we go into communities and say the word affordable housing, you can watch walls come up in front of people. They've made a decision of what that is, and they don't want it in NIMBY, they don't want it in their neighborhoods. But then you ask them the question, can a first-year teacher living in your community afford to live in your community? Will their salary allow them to do that? And oftentimes the answer is, well, no. Well, can a first-year fireman or police officer? Affordability is a very relative term. So we use the word attainable housing. It takes away some of the stigma, and we can talk about what we're really talking about. Affordable housing in the more strict terms is 0 to 30% of average median income is really the hardest group to take care of. Many of them are not working. Those are the ones that there's not a lot of safety measures for. The housing, like the tax credit housing that we've shown you that we build, generally addresses 30 to 80% of average median income. So within your community, that's the range of folks who can live in these projects. From 80 to 110%, there really isn't much of a program to help them. This is workforce housing. These are the teachers, the police officers, the nurses. If you work in an emergency room in a hospital, you're required to live within 30 minutes of that emergency room. So we are working with a project out in Dare County in Kitty Hawk, where an X-ray technician can't afford to live on that island, and it takes 30 minutes to get across the bridge. So housing issues are more than just simply affordable. What are the challenges? The way you can build housing affordably is to reduce your debt, reduce your costs. That's why tax credits work. But in rural communities, you generally cannot get tax credits, and in most of the states, you can't get them. So it's challenging. So churches have to be creative about how they do this. This is a project we just opened. We are almost 100% leased now. We built this project on a ground lease for the Board of Trustees of the conference. So the Board of Trustees took a faithful step. This was a closed church co-memorial, and we have built 73 units of affordable housing. We have room on this site to build an additional building, which could be a new church start. So the church hasn't left this community. We're still there. We just look very differently. And we're still serving the community, but just in a different way. There are multiple ways, multiple kinds of housing. This is a church in Asheboro that we have. The county in Asheboro has no women or children shelter. So if they have a need, a woman who has that need, they have to go find a place in the county somewhere else. We've converted the church. We're finishing phase 2 now. to a 40+ bed women and children's shelter. Again, the church is still in the community. This is attached to a United Methodist Church that's strong in the community. And we just are using our buildings and serving differently. You don't have to take a whole campus to do this. If you have multiple buildings on your campus, you might consider doing something like this in one of the buildings. They are challenging in that when you begin to allow people to sleep in a building, the code changes. And so you have fire stops, you have sprinkler systems. There are a lot of things to consider, but we have 16 million square feet. We can convert some of these to address some of these issues. In this particular shelter, we'll be able to take you in an emergency situation. You're living in your car, say, and take you in to handle the initial emergency. You can stay in this facility for several months, get your feet back on the ground, and get yourself get a job and get positioned, and then we can take you to a parsonage that we also have there and let you rent. So you learn a bit more about home ownership. You learn a bit more about what it takes to care for a house, and then we partner you with Habitat for Humanity to own your own home. So the real estate platform that's been built can take you from living in your car to getting on your feet to renting to home ownership. Now, the programming piece comes from others. The programming piece comes from churches. The programming piece comes from an LLC we formed to manage the shelter from Habitat. We're using the brick and mortar and dirt to help facilitate this journey. But it's exciting to be able to offer a journey from living in your car to own your own home, and doing it all on church, on faith-based property. This is a project that we're doing actually with an AME Zion church in Wilmington. This church has some extra land, and it's actually less than an acre, but we're actually able to build on this project supportive housing, which is going to have single family homes with ADUs in the back. ADUs are auxiliary dwelling units. They're a smaller home than the main home. The population of this complex will be moderate income seniors, and in downtown Wilmington, real estate is expensive. So moderate income seniors and young adults with disabilities. And in that, you think autism spectrum. So if you're 70 years old and your child has autism, there's very little safety net for them. This is building a real estate platform, wrapping services around it to help create a place for them to stay and create peace of mind for folks whose children are in this situation.
Joel, may I interrupt for just a moment?
Yes.
We had a question in the chat asking, are the parcels and square feet quoted after disassociation?
Yes. Before disaffiliation, or pardon me, before disaffiliation, we had 22 million square feet. The 16 million square feet is post. So we track all real estate. We have a pretty massive spreadsheet. And then we take all that and put it on ArcGIS. That allows us, if we're looking at something like the picture we have here, allows us to go in and look at demographics, look at utilities, look at any kind of public information that's out there we can overlay on top of our properties. But yes, 16 million is the after, the post effect. So this project is in zoning right now and permitting, and we will be breaking ground on that this year. It's a model that we will hope to replicate. The two populations, the seniors and the young adults with disabilities, are the studies show they work well together, and that's it's a benefit for both. It's an intentional, healthy community with a lot of coming together with folks. From the church's perspective, from St. Luke's, they are ground leasing this piece of property to us to do this project. They get to interface with the residents, but they're not having to pay than actually getting paid for use of their land. It's a ground lease. And they are able to interface and interact with those folks on their own terms. So it's the church doing community impact at the same time generating revenue for the church. And it's an everybody wins kind of situation. Foster care. We have parsonages. We have parsonages that are unused now. And sometimes the first reaction is let's sell them. However, foster care homes are not easy to come by. It's a need. It's a significant need, and to be able to fill that need, again, bringing in the social services, bringing in the governmental support system, bringing in the foster parents, the church is providing the platform. And then it can provide ministerial support as well, but it's providing the platform. We already have the platform. It's just a matter of how we use it. This is a church in Florida we're working with that is taking their education wing and building for post foster care. So when you turn 18, you can still receive foster care support, but you don't have a place to live. At that point, you have to leave foster care housing. I have two children that have passed through the age of 18, and I can promise you 18 was not a magic number that they suddenly knew how to live on their own. And so I don't see why we would assume that that's the same for these kids. In this case, it's a very interesting. The church is partnering with a college. The college is offering scholarship money for the kids to go to school. The residents of this complex will need a job. They'll need to pay rent and learn how to do those kind of adult type things and go to college. So they get a place to live. They get more skills training and more time to mature and grow up. And they get an education. The church is providing the real estate, and they're raising the funds to upfit the real estate. But the services that are coming are not taxing the congregation. I think one of the things that we have to remember when we talk about doing anything that's innovative and directed towards social impact is that we can't tax our congregations. Our congregations have done a lot of heavy lifting over the years, and a lot of them are tired. And a lot of them say, you know, I'd love to do this. We just can't tackle something else. And that's fair. So there are ways to use what generations before us have built and provided for us and have a social impact without overextending our congregations. This is another church in Florida that is working on developing a sober community. Now, a sober community is going to look like any other apartment or community complex or anything, except one thing. The residents have agreed, and most, if not all, are in recovery, that they will attend meetings, they will stay sober, they will make that a part of who that community is. There's a group called the Fletcher Group that is really helping to develop a lot of this across really the East Coast. And it's become a very interesting concept that we're paying attention to. Again, this would probably be built on excess land that churches had, probably not in their building, but it's a need. I mean, addiction is at all-time highs, particularly opioids. And you don't want to return somebody who's trying to fight through that back into the community that they found themselves in and where this occurred. Some of this can also be recovery housing, which is if somebody has determined they need help and they need to go into, say, detox, but there's 3 or 4 day wait to get a bed somewhere. Again, you don't want to return them back into the community where this occurred. They need a place to go that's safe, where there are services wrapped around to help them. They come out of detox and they want to go into recovery. So that's a longer term program. Again, there's not enough beds. So generally there's a window of time between those two events, they need a safe place to go, a safe place to be. And several of our churches are using education wings to convert that to short-term residential so that persons can have that safe place to be. And they commit and they go into it that you're not leaving, you're locking the doors, you're staying here with us to help bridge them from that detox to recovery. There's another window when they come out of recovery, because you still have to get back on your feet. You still have to get back into that workforce, into the world, which offers all the same challenges that you faced when you got into the issue. So there are multiple steps of recovery that churches can serve a true help, a true purpose in. This is a program that Wesley has been working on for a couple of years. So a couple of years ago, I went to, well, actually it was pre-COVID. I went to a housing conference, and it's one of these conferences where you, at lunchtime, you go into a big banquet room and there's tables of 8, and you just pick a spot, and whoever's beside you is beside you, and you strike up a conversation. And there was a very sweet lady sitting beside me, and she was adamant about affordable housing in rural communities. And so what part of the conversation came up was that part of what we do as an organization is we will manage closed churches and help determine what the disposition of those buildings should be. And she looked at me very nicely. She was really very sweet and said, well, the church might as well leave because everybody else has. The grocery stores are gone. The doctors are gone. The banks are gone. Church might as well leave too. And so I came back to our team and said, well, that didn't feel real good. So let's start thinking about this. So we've been working on a rural village center concept, and I think we now have two locations that we are ready to pilot, which is going to be a different kind of building, a different kind of church. It's not going to have a steeple. It's not going to have pews. It's going to have touchdown space for medical, touchdown space for mental health. It's going to have probably potentially maker space and creative space, libraries, a large multi-purpose room that can be used for community events and can be used for co-working space, but then also can be used for worship. It will be a faith community. It will be a faith-based community. We will have we'll have church, and we'll have children lockers for food storage. I mean, we want to recreate a center that attracts the rural community for multiple reasons to that area. There'll be a lot of green space around it, and then there will be scalable, affordable housing, because most communities like this don't need 73 to 100 units on a 4-story building. It wouldn't fit. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't fit into the community. So this concept would build maybe 10, maybe 20 homes around it, but creating a community, connecting with green space and with services. Pastors would have to go through a different level of training for this. It's something very different, but it is a way to return back to the rural community and look differently, but be intentional, roll our sleeves up and get involved in that community. We've been working with an architect called Gensler to look at what some of these space plans will look like. Some of it will be new builds, some of it will be reuse of existing, but we're looking for common themes, one of which is green space to connect and how the different spaces interact. There'll be so as an example, there'll be counseling space here, which has to have private entrances and has to have some be comfortable for those who are coming for counseling. If we have a pharmacy in here, we have to have things that we can ways to lock down that. So this is a concept we hope will take us back into the rural community in a completely different way, and be of service to that community. So not everything has to be a full-blown change your campus, rebuild, add sprinklers, etc. There are other less dramatic ways to have social impact. And as I said before, the one thing that we really paid attention to is we can't bring 50 programs into a church and expect the church to step up and manage those. That's not fair to the congregation. What we want to encourage people to do is look at their space and look at what groups are doing good work in their community, and is there a marriage and a partnership there? If you walk into McDonald's and you see somebody trying to tutor a child and all that chaos, and your church is 3 blocks down the road and the rooms are empty, then we've got to miss a disconnect. We're not helping and using and serving the community with our assets. One of the things, as I told you, we're very data driven, and we study every church that we work with. And this is an actual average of the churches that we studied. From 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. Don't ask anybody what they're doing in the church at midnight. Our churches are being used 10.5%. Now, if you think of 16 million square feet at 10.5% usage, 7 days a week, then we have a huge opportunity, an 89.5% opportunity to do something different with the buildings that we have. So it's important that a church understand their usage, understand where it's being used, what are the opportunities, what rooms are available for other uses. Some of the things that churches have done that this was one of the first churches that came to Seeds of Change. They built a very robust community garden and even incorporated their vacation Bible school into it. This is the only church I've ever known who, instead of a covered dish supper, had a tomato sandwich supper, which I'm pretty cool with that. That goes back to my history. But the other thing they built around this was a walking trail. And I thought, okay, a walking trail, because they noticed this is a very rural community. There were no sidewalks. So if you wanted to go and get healthy and walk, etc., you were having to take your life in your hands walking along the street up against the cars. By just doing a walking trail, they brought the community to them and the community garden in ways that helped, were driven to improve health, improve connectivity with each other, and it was an incredibly, it wasn't $1 million to do this. It wasn't, everybody having to work nonstop for 6 months, but it was very, very impactful and continues to be so. This is a church that we are managing that has a number of counselors who are releasing space. Now, we had said before, mental health is a significant issue now, particularly coming out of COVID, and particularly with young folks. Counselors need space that is non-threatening to meet with people, and we have space. We have rooms that work well for this service. Again, the church is having a social impact. They are able to generate some small revenue off of it, and they are serving the community with space they already have. They're not having to build. This church houses 2 nonprofits. One is a pretty robust food bank and feeding ministry. Everybody does feeding ministries differently. This is one where folks come in and take boxes of food with them for preparation. They also do something called Last Mile, which in this community, the bus line stops about a mile away from the center of the community. But a lot of folks need that bus service in order to get to medical and to work, etc. So Last Mile fills exactly what it says. They will give you transportation from your home to that bus stop so that you're able to reach the services that you need to reach. 2 good ministries being done by 2 nonprofits, not by the congregation, serving the community, utilizing space that we already had that was sitting vacant. So again, it's marrying services and marrying people who are already very good at what they do with space that they don't have. And you can do that in such a way that it is impactful, that it is a cost benefit to the church. It helps offset costs you're already spending, and you're impacting the community. So this is what we were talking about before about the about McDonald's. You can look around your community and you can see almost anywhere you go needs that are being filled in whatever way they can, whether that's Starbucks doing tutoring or McDonald's doing tutoring. You can see that these these ministries or these services or ministries or whatever you want to, however you want to see them, need space to do it well. And we have the space. So it's a matter of re-looking at how we look at our buildings. I think everybody knows about these studies. So pre-COVID, not post, pre-COVID, loneliness was an epidemic portions. So about half of U.S. adults pre-COVID said that they experienced measurable levels of loneliness. Now, post-COVID, I haven't seen studies on post-COVID yet, but I'm certain that that number has dramatically increased because we all got pushed into our houses and we're all doing things like the conversations we're having now over a computer screen. So how can we impact that? I mean, church is about connection and purpose. Church is about connecting us to each other and to something bigger than ourselves, and purpose. Why do we get up and what do we do every day? So this is one of the programs that that almost every county, I believe, in North Carolina has something similar to this. This happens to be the one in Cabarrus County. It is a feeding program for seniors 5 days a week. They come in, they get a meal, they have some activities, and they're not charging anything for this. It's generally funded by AARP. My wife actually ran one of these for a while, and so I got a chance to take a look at it, and one of our churches hosts one. The Many of the seniors come, it's not for the food. It's because they don't want to be sitting at home alone all day long. It's because they want to build those relationships. Now, from a church's perspective, the food is brought in, so the kitchen of the church is only used as a warming kitchen. The program is staffed by the entity, by AARP. Church doesn't have to pay staff. That staff cleans up behind themselves. They don't have to do janitorial. So the church can just invite them to come in and use their space. And of course, they pay a lease payment to do that. Or the church is really smart, comes in and joins them and gets to know them. But it is about really combating food insecurity, yes, but it is more about combating loneliness. I said for a number of days and watched and listened and talked to folks. And they, if one of them didn't show up one day, everybody knew it, everybody worried about them, everybody called them. That's what we're supposed to be. That's what we're supposed to do. And we already have the kitchens, we have the fellowship halls, it's all there. This is a program that again is not a cost to the church, but it can be a powerful impact to the community. I spent several days a couple months ago up at Lake Junaluska in a conversation about dementia and about the church's response to dementia. So over 6 million Americans currently live with Alzheimer's. And by 2050, there will be nearly 15 million in the US living with dementia. Now, 1 in 3 seniors will dies of Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, but the stat that you don't usually hear is the caregivers generally die first because they're the ones who have the stress. They're aware of the surroundings. They're aware of what is happening. in our work. And so we know that memory care, should you reach a point where you need someone to take care of this person, can run $12,000 to $15,000 a month, and there is nobody who pays for it. Insurance doesn't pay, Medicare doesn't pay. It's an out of pocket. So a lot of people are the caregiver out of necessity, but it's a 24/7 job. You're never off. So what's happening is there is a movement, and it's in many ways being led by two retired United Methodist bishops to create something, to create respite care sites. There's 31 of these so far, and there's a large conversation about how can we increase and build this. So respite care is about a 4 hour a day. So you bring the person with dementia into your church, into a building, nothing fancy, don't have to spend a lot of money to upfit on this. They'll stay for 4 hours, and the caregiver can then have a 4 hour break per day, which is incredibly impactful when you think about never being able to stop, never being able to um, uh, walk away from the responsibilities that you have. So again, there's Dementia Care Ministry Network is what it's being called. It was being put together this year. It is the program is already set. It's something you can follow along pretty easily, and it is an incredibly important work that again doesn't require huge amounts of investment. It is very volunteer driven, so churches can really get involved, but it doesn't have to be just church members that do it. So social entrepreneurship, we have the ability to use our buildings to help folks begin companies or organizations that are directed towards solutions to social, cultural, environmental issues, and to be incubators for that type of work. In our conference, that is led a lot by a group called Imagine Hub. And I'm sure a lot of you know Cindy, and she does great work, and is helping churches kind of think through how they can use their facilities to help generate social entrepreneurship, help people raise themselves into being able to sustain themselves, and using our buildings again without major renovations, just using what we already have. Commercial kitchen rentals. So many of you have kitchens, and the commercial kitchen is the kitchen that's been inspected and remains inspected. So you're going to have a hood with fire suppression, et cetera, et cetera. If you are a caterer in North Carolina, or if you have the greatest sauce in the world and you want to sell it, and for a lot of people, this is a way to become self-sufficient and get off of a poverty cycle. You can't do it in your kitchen and sell it. You can't prep your food truck in your kitchen to sell. You can't cater out of your kitchen. You have to use a commercial kitchen. In fact, in many of our cities now, Charlotte included, there are kitchens being built simply to rent out pods, so that you can legally do this. So if you have one, you can lease it out. You can also use it for to teach cooking classes, teach culinary. But it's if it's there and if it's inspected, there's a lot of usage you can do, and it has an impact. If I can make myself self-sufficient, if I can support my family by creating and selling a product, and I couldn't do it otherwise, and you have the facility sitting there that I need, then it's a good marriage. It's a good impact. This was one of the first projects that Wesley ever did. We had a church who on any given Sunday there were 6 languages being spoken. This was a church in a heavy immigrant population. This is a church where when they would have a community dinner, they would have to sit down with some of their parishioners and say, you know, we're inviting the police and the fire department to this dinner. That's not a bad thing. They are our friends. So one of the needs they saw was they wanted to build a preschool that was bilingual. And multicultural, so they could learn about each other at a young age before we get too many stigmas attached. For a lot of these children, it wasn't so much that English was a challenge. They had never seen things like doorknobs. So in this case, we helped them create the space so they could get a 5-star rated preschool. Now, what you also may have been reading a lot of recently is North Carolina is on the cliff of not having enough preschool. In fact, it's more and more, particularly in rural communities, employers are saying we can't get people to work for us because they have no place for their children to stay. It is a rising issue. Many of our buildings have what were designed as preschools many years ago. We don't use them that way any longer. There are code issues to make sure if you want to do a 4-star and really a full day. We did a lot of half day, a lot of mother's morning out. But full day is what really is impactful because it allows someone to work. Bringing in an operator so the church does not have to do it themselves is an option. You have the space, and then the space can be converted as need be in many buildings to be able to do this. But childcare is rapidly becoming more and more of an issue in our state, and it's becoming more and more of an issue for economic empowerment of residents of our state. So I would suggest we watch that because it's really coming to the top here quickly. This is a church that went to a local community college where they had an entrepreneurial program. They asked, can we read the theses or of the students? And they read one from a student who wanted to lease a small space and create an arts program. And so they went to her and said, look, we will give you a room for 1 year and you see what you can do with it. And she now has a whole wing of the church. You know, if you look at this and you think about this and you think about the commercial kitchen, think about the things that schools have had to get rid of as budgets have tightened. Art programs, you'd makerspace, which is the same thing as shop class, cooking in commercial kitchens, dance, music, all these things that have had to be scaled back by schools can be picked up by churches. So you could have rooms that, you know, we had a church recently that I walked at. I'd never seen this, but there was a piano in every room. And by the way, you can't sell pianos. Nobody wants to buy them. But there's a piano in every room. So why don't we invite music teachers who want to teach piano to use our space as their studio? That is not in schools any longer. Why? If there's somebody who's teaching the violin, if somebody who's teaching, our rooms are perfect for that in the evenings and they're not being used. Same with art. Art has been scaled back in schools. There are many things that you can do with art and allow artists to come in and do it. We have a group right now that is asking us to find 5 churches in North Carolina to be part of a cohort of introducing art into the church building and use that as a way to bring the community into the church. And that is including studio space, that is including art shows and galleries. You know, you can take it wherever you want. You can have children's art classes. In this church, during the day, the seniors are coming in and doing art. And then when school lets out, the kids are coming in and doing art. And then you have weekends that are out. It's a perfect marriage with a church. Art is a great expression of how we feel and of our emotions. Makerspace is much the same. Makerspace marries the older generation, which knows how to use a bandsaw without cutting your hand off, with a younger generation who doesn't know what a bandsaw is, and helps them learn to build and work together. think about your kids when they were younger and you gave them a couple of blocks and a box and they started building stuff. There's still that innate piece that people want to do. Again, all they need is space. All they need is a place to do this and the right marriage with people who do it well. We have that 10.5% usage. Creation care. We talked about how the conference center is leak old and is net meter to the grid, and that we built it to make a statement. Well, all churches can't do all of that, but we can begin to get very serious about how we use our space, about how we can address the climate crisis. The Creation Care Ministry in West North Carolina Conference is growing, and it's growing with an attitude of how can we take our churches and do better by the environment. At Wesley, we're taking a slightly larger view and asking the question of how can we make 16 million square feet carbon neutral? Because the truth of the matter is we want the young folks to pay attention. They want to pay attention that we're doing something that's going to impact them in the future. And that would get everyone's attention. And we're working on what that looks like and how that might be able to be accomplished with some of the general agencies and with some other folks. If we could do that on 16 million feet, we would get the attention. We would move the needle and we would get the attention of a lot of folks, which is what, and the conversation of the church is really engaged and involved in our lives would be impactful. So social impact doesn't require, again, we keep coming back to this, because many of our congregations are frightened at what they think we're asking them to do. We're asking them to do yet another program, and they've lifted big rocks for years. Doesn't have to be that way. We can partner with people who do really good work. We have the space that we're not using, and it can become a relationship that helps. It won't add, if it's structured correctly, it doesn't add a financial burden. In fact, it can potentially help for the church. It doesn't add unnecessary risk, but it helps engage and invite the community back into the building, back into the church. We build buildings that are heavy brick, heavy wooden doors, windows you can't see through. And it's kind of like we didn't want anybody to know what's going on inside. And if you didn't grow up in the church, that can be very intimidating. These are ways to bring people into the building, meet the people of the church, find out the great message we have, the great message of hope that we have, but do so in an unintimidating way. So that's another, that's probably the most important component of the social impact. So that's the beginning of the conversation. Any questions? Any comments?
Joel, thanks for interesting presentation. One thing that I thought about is, we went through a season in our church where we were not able to continue with a BSA, a scouting unit here because, historic lack of oversight, supervision.
Yep, I know what you mean.
Training, all that. Where scouting now seems to me to take it much more seriously. Their screening, prevention, background checks, all that. I mean, I hear a lot from the conference about wanting to fill our spaces, and I agree with it in principle, but I do get anxious about liability issues. If the scouts can't meet here safely, who can we be sure can?
Yep, and I think we, lessons learned. I mean, I think we learned from scouting legal structures to set up to help protect. We use so there's really kind of two forms if a group is going to interface with us in a building. One is a lease, but a lease means that I'm leasing you that space 24/7, it's yours. But in that lease, the insurance requirements and all of the protections are built in. And so you're very, there's a way to build a wall to protect the church. If it's somebody who's not using it full time, there's a thing called a shared use agreement that we've developed. So the shared use agreement basically is, Matt, you can use this space during this time during these days, but I'm going to use it otherwise. It's my building. So maybe you're going to use the fellowship hall for 3 hours a week. The shared use agreement does a couple of things. One, it still has all the protections of a lease. You're still required to have certain insurance and provide, list me as an additional insured. So if you were ever to drop your insurance, I get a letter from the insurance company telling me. So it's hard for you to get around any of that kind of stuff. So all that, but then also on a shared use agreement, it says, man, I'm not charging you rent, but you're going to make a donation of X. So from an IRS perspective, it's a donation. So using those documents, we got a little loose about that. In fact, we never really did it very well. But now we understand that in our world, we say, look, we do leases not for when everybody's holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but we do it for when it hits the fan and everybody needs to know what their responsibilities are. Mm-hmm. And those agreements can be put in place and it will help protect you.
Thanks.
When you get into some of those groups like the senior feeding ministry, I mean, that's a very professional, very well done operation. And it's coming in generally from the county or the city. So they're very accustomed to signing agreements that because they want to be covered as well.
Thank you for your question, Matt. Really excellent. Does anybody else have any questions for Joel?
I just want to jump in and agree with Matt that this was an extraordinary presentation, Joel. I've seen several of your presentations, and I just feel like that you need to hear again that this is amazing and what you do is just exceptional. And just please know that the Women's Center really appreciates you. Thank you.
Thanks. I do appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, if our church was interested in talking to you all about redevelopment of our property, how we're also in tight financial times in our church somewhat. So I'm wondering,
you're not alone.
Yeah. How much of an investment is it to have like a consultation, just a preliminary, here's the possibilities that are out there? I don't know.
Well, the preliminary conversation is free. I mean, what you would do is the info line that's on the screen now, you would send in a request and it just gives us some basic information. Allison's going to take that and she's going to sort of figure out who needs to be on a call, and we'll do a Zoom call and talk about where you are and where you think you want to go. And from that point, that we determine what the next steps are. But we're not going to, it's never my intent to let dollars get in the way of helping a church. So if you want to just hit that info line and kind of tell us what you want to talk about, and we'll get on a Zoom call and get in particulars, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Matt, thank you for asking that question. And just to echo and reiterate what Joel just offered, for anyone who has any questions or may wish to join in conversation about your particular congregation's needs, if you visit our website that's on the screen now, or send an email to the one that's listed, I will receive those inbound inquiries and can make the arrangements for you to have that first Zoom call with Joel or other members of our team so that we can further the discussion and really explore what your congregation needs or what your church is hoping to move toward as as the future unfolds. So if you have any specific questions about that, please do contact us at the website listed, which is wesleycdc.com, or send us an email to info@wesleycdc.com. And once I receive that, I'll be the first to reach out.
All right, well, everybody, it was good to see familiar faces and good to meet new ones. And I wish you well, and you know how to find us if you would like to talk.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Bye.